Okay. Our second speaker is Sue Arrington. Sue Arrington is state representative to the Indiana State House for District 34, which is essentially the city of Muncie. She's also an activist for women's choice, and she's a former public policy director for the local Planned Parenthood affiliate, which later became part of Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky. She's the ranking minority member of the House Environmental Affairs Committee. She's also a member of the Natural Resources Committee and serves as vice chair of the Statutory Committee on Ethics. Sue Arrington.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I'd like to put this in a context of a lot of people, I think today, feel like there were no abortions before Roe v. Wade. There were no legal abortions in most states, but there were certainly illegal abortions everywhere. I can remember shortly before Roe v. Wade was decided, that is one of the early issues of Ms. Magazine, had a multi-page list of women who had had abortions. I mean, Ms. had put out a request for women to, really out themselves, because as you've just heard, it's something that women are reluctant to talk about. And that was when I read that list, and there were all these women that were nationally known that you found out for the first time they'd had an abortion, and many others that, were only known to their families and their friends who were also on the list. So that was a pretty eye-opening thing back then. Another thing that was going on at the time was something called Jane. It was in Chicago, and it was a group of women who helped women find abortions. They had a group of doctors who were willing to do the abortion. They were trained. So it wasn't like going to the back alley abortions where you might be going in Muncie. But they, towards the end, they were beginning to train other women to do abortions. But then Roe v. Wade happened, and Jane wasn't needed anymore. Another thing that was going on back then, women all over the country were learning to do menstrual extractions. It was to extract your menstrual period all at once. And it wasn't necessarily for abortion, but there were probably some abortions that happened in those very early menstrual extractions. Another thing, as you just heard, that some states did legalize abortion before Roe v. Wade. One early one was Hawaii, another one was New York. And there was a group called the Clergy Consultation Service that was a loose coalition of ministers. They were active in many cities. In fact, there was one here in Muncie. I didn't know about it until later, but they, women learned to meet with these ministers if they were thinking about getting an abortion, or if they just didn't know. They didn't really plan the pregnancy, and what could they do? And if they decided they wanted an abortion, those ministers helped. They had the names of clinics in New York City and helped them find the way to get there. So that was what was going on in the context of Roe v. Wade. We thought we were going to have a long fight. All of a sudden, the decision came down and abortion was legal everywhere. But it wasn't very long till the backlash started, and so there were laws and bills to cut back. There were bills to do away with Roe v. Wade, but those have never been able to get any traction, at least not yet. So the strategy changed of those who wanted to make abortion illegal to, well, let's just make it difficult to get. So that's where a lot of the legislation, both at the federal and the state level, have concentrated over the years since Roe v. Wade. And yes, this was one of the issues that got me into the women's movement. I can remember I was a member of the local Now chapter, and every anniversary of Roe v. Wade, we would do something to bring attention to it. And one year we decided, we knew that there had been abortions in Muncie. And one of our members was the daughter of 2 judges who said, oh yeah, my parents used to tell us about this alley downtown where women would meet with illegal abortionists, and then they'd go to wherever they had the abortion. So we decided to have a rally in the alley to commemorate the fact that that's what we women, desperate women used to do. And now we don't have to. So we also, I wrote a lot of letters to the editor. And in fact, that's how I got involved with Planned Parenthood. I had written a letter to the editor, and I was over at Ball State at a buffet for the wives, faculty wives. And it was a big long line. It was a salad buffet over at the student center. And I was standing in line, and the woman ahead of me said, oh, I introduced myself. And she said, oh, aren't you the person that writes the letters to the editor? And I said, yes. And she says, well, I'm Barbara Maves. I'm the director of Planned Parenthood. So as we were waiting in line to get our salads, we struck up this conversation. She invited me to get involved with Planned Parenthood. She invited me to be on the board. So I was on the board first. And later I joined the staff of Planned Parenthood as a public policy director. So another incident, this was actually before Roe v. Wade was passed. I visited our local congressman, who was a Republican from Richmond, and he came to Muncie. So I went in to see him to tell him why I thought he should support some legislation that would improve the situation for women. It's probably something having to do with Roe v. Wade, or maybe it was, I guess it was wanted him to vote against some of these federal bills that were trying to eliminate the access to abortion. And as we were sitting there talking, I heard this noise. It was like this banging noise coming from under the desk. And I realized this man is very uncomfortable. He's hitting the desk with his foot. He's so uncomfortable. So he still voted the wrong way as far as I was concerned, but it did make me realize that this subject wasn't just difficult for women, it was also difficult for a lot of men. More recently, I have become a state legislator myself. And it seems like every year since I've been in the legislature, there has been at least one bill to limit access to abortion that's introduced. And quite often they pass because the opponents of abortion are pretty astute. They send out questionnaires to candidates when they're running for election. And they ask a question about, and sometimes a series of questions about abortion and where do you stand on this? And it's been especially effective among Republicans, because there are many, many of them who have turned in those questionnaires and made a commitment. And so that's one of the reasons we keep seeing all this legislation and seeing it pass. Even legislation that they know is going to be overturned. They know it isn't going to stand the light of the courts. Many of these pieces of legislation have already been tried out in some other state and have been overturned. And there are a lot of them that Indiana gets that they aren't original thinking. There's this whole system, just like there are the pregnancy centers that are part of a larger system. The bills that we see turn up in Indiana are part of think tanks that are a national strategy to cut back on access to abortion. And I can remember, it's been a couple of years ago that Speaker Bosma, and it was, I think, the last night of the session, and they were taking a break. The Rules Committee was meeting upstairs and the rest of us were sitting around waiting for them to come back. And Speaker Bosma came to where a group of us Democratic women were sitting. And the anti-abortion bill that year had just passed. And so we started talking about it. And he said, "Oh, what are you worried about? It's just going to be overturned." So, you know, they know, and yet they still pass these bills. And Planned Parenthood and Indiana Civil Liberties have taken them to court, and most of them have failed to the tune of millions of dollars. Indiana has spent over 1.5 million of our taxpayer money defending these laws that many in the legislature knew were illegal in the first place. The most recent one was just decided beginning of the year, or the end of last year, is a 2016 law, and that one cost the state $182,000, and they lost. So I guess with that, I will stop for now and wait for questions. Thank you.